Emotional detachment is one of the clearest signs of someone who's experienced many relationships. For women who've had multiple partners, it can become a protective mechanism to avoid getting hurt. It's not coldness, but a learned response, one that echoes Stoic principles of emotional control. Stoicism teaches us to master our emotions, yet it also cautions against shutting them off completely. By balancing emotional distance with awareness, women can preserve their strength without losing their humanity. In this article, we'll dive deeper into how emotional detachment, trust issues, and other behaviors can reflect a complex relationship with past experiences. You'll discover how Stoic wisdom can offer profound healing and guidance for those navigating their emotional landscape. Sign 2. Difficulty trusting others. Building emotional walls often stems from a deep-seated fear of being hurt again. For many women who've had multiple relationships, trust becomes something they struggle to give. Their past experiences, filled with betrayal, heartache, and disappointment, have conditioned them to question others' intentions, even when there's no reason to. It's like trying to trust a new bridge when the last one collapsed under weight. But here's where the Stoic philosophy can truly transform lives. Stoicism encourages the cultivation of self-awareness and emotional resilience, and it offers a unique perspective on trust. Instead of relying on external validation or fearing betrayal, Stoics believe in controlling how we respond to situations. We cannot control the actions of others, but we can control how we react to them. This mindset allows us to develop a trust that's less about the other person's behavior and more about our own inner peace. Imagine a woman, Sarah, who had been hurt by several previous partners. Each time she opened her heart, she found herself let down, her trust violated. So, she decided to withdraw. She built high walls around her heart, leaving no room for anyone to enter. When someone new came along, Sarah would instantly shut them out, fearful that they'd bring the same pain as her past relationships. However, when Sarah started practicing Stoicism, everything began to change. She understood that her lack of trust wasn't just about others, it was about her inability to trust herself. She'd built her walls to protect her from pain, but in doing so, she'd also kept out love, connection, and growth. Stoicism taught her that, while she couldn't control others, she could control how she handled disappointment and pain. Over time, Sarah learned to open herself up again, not by trusting others unconditionally, but by trusting her own ability to handle whatever came her way. She stopped relying on external circumstances to define her emotional state. She could experience trust without fear because she knew that no matter the outcome, she would be okay. The idea that misfortune is an opportunity for growth resonated deeply with her, and slowly, she started giving people a chance once more. This shift doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't mean you'll never face betrayal again. But it does mean that you will have the strength and wisdom to handle it with grace and inner peace. Trust, then, becomes something we cultivate within ourselves, a gift we give ourselves not dependent on the actions of others. For women who've been through many relationships, learning to trust again is about finding a balance between the lessons of the past and the hope for the future. With Stoic wisdom, they can learn to trust in their own judgment, their own heart, and the idea that no matter what, they have the strength to face whatever comes next. Through this, they can finally let go of the chains that their past experiences have placed around their hearts. Sign 3. A pattern of self-sabotage. Moving from one failed relationship to the next often brings a painful realization. The woman may start to feel like she's sabotaging her own happiness. This pattern of self-sabotage, where she unconsciously pushes good things away, is deeply tied to her past experiences. The belief that she's unworthy of lasting love or happiness often grows stronger with each failed attempt, leading her to repeat destructive cycles. The fear of being let down again can even cause her to make decisions that undermine her happiness before others can. This all connects back to the difficulty of trusting others. If you've been hurt repeatedly, it's easy to think that the best way to avoid more pain is to control the situation, even if that means sabotaging the chance for real happiness. But here's the truth. Self-sabotage often comes from a lack of self-love and self-worth. Women who feel unworthy may unconsciously push away the very things they crave: intimacy, connection, and lasting love. Let's take a closer look at a woman named Emily. Emily had always been a free spirit, passionate about her career and her personal growth. She had everything she needed, except for love. Over the years, Emily had experienced heartbreak, betrayal, and disappointment in relationships. After each painful breakup, she vowed never to fall for someone again. But every time a new potential partner came into her life, she found a way to ruin things. She'd pull away emotionally, create distance, or start arguments over nothing. On the outside, she seemed fine, but deep down, she was terrified of being hurt once more. Emily didn't realize that she was sabotaging her happiness. Her fear of vulnerability was causing her to destroy the very thing she longed for. She didn't believe that she deserved a healthy, loving relationship because the past had painted a different picture, one of rejection and disappointment. She felt as if happiness was an illusion meant for others, but not for her. But everything changed when Emily started practicing Stoicism. She learned that by focusing on what she could control, her thoughts, actions, and responses, she could break the cycle of self-sabotage. Stoicism emphasizes the importance of developing self-awareness and understanding that our emotions, no matter how intense, don't define us. Emily began to recognize the patterns of behavior that caused her to push people away. She started to challenge her negative beliefs about herself, realizing that she was worthy of love and connection, regardless of her past mistakes. Through self-reflection and the Stoic principle of accepting things outside of our control, Emily began to heal. She realized that to break the cycle of self-sabotage, she had to stop fearing vulnerability and open herself up to the possibility of love. By acknowledging her fears without letting them control her, she was able to stop sabotaging her own happiness. Self-sabotage is a defense mechanism, but it's not the way to protect yourself. Instead, it's about learning to trust in your own strength and your own worth. Women who have struggled with multiple relationships can overcome this pattern and start creating healthier, more fulfilling bonds by focusing on their inner peace and accepting the fact that love is not about perfection, but about growth, vulnerability, and emotional resilience. Stoicism teaches us that while we cannot change the past, we can change how we approach our future, one that doesn't involve sabotaging the good things that come our way. Sign 4. Fear of emotional intimacy. As we continue to explore the patterns women may exhibit after experiencing multiple relationships, it becomes clear that the fear of emotional intimacy is a significant barrier. This fear often stems from the accumulated hurt and disappointment from past partners. The more a woman has been hurt, the more difficult it becomes to trust again, even if the person in front of her doesn't deserve to be treated with suspicion. It's as if her heart has built walls so high that even genuine affection can feel threatening. This fear of emotional intimacy is often misunderstood, both by the woman experiencing it and by those around her. On the surface, she may appear to be independent, strong, or even uninterested in deeper connections. But the truth is, the deeper she falls, the more vulnerable she feels. The truth can be harsh. No matter how many walls we build, love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability demands courage. Take the story of Sarah, for example. Sarah had experienced several painful breakups in her past, each one leaving scars that took time to heal. After the third major heartbreak, she decided that love was not worth the pain. She began to isolate herself emotionally, refusing to let anyone get too close. Even though she longed for companionship, she could not allow herself to be vulnerable again. Every time someone showed interest in her, Sarah would retreat, finding excuses to keep things casual. She would end relationships before they had a chance to get too serious, convinced that she was protecting herself. But deep down, Sarah felt empty. She would lie awake at night, wondering why she couldn't feel the connection she craved. The truth was, she was terrified of allowing someone to truly see her. She had convinced herself that if she didn't allow anyone to see her wounds, they couldn't hurt her again. Yet, by doing so, she was only isolating herself further. It wasn't until Sarah discovered the wisdom of Stoicism that she realized her fear of emotional intimacy was simply another form of avoidance. Stoicism teaches us that the key to overcoming emotional challenges lies in confronting our fears with awareness, understanding that vulnerability isn't a weakness, but a strength. By learning to focus on the present moment and understanding that we cannot control everything, we free ourselves from the burden of fear and insecurity. Through self-reflection, Sarah began to understand that her fear was rooted in the past, a past she could not change. What she could control was how she responded to her feelings in the present. By practicing mindfulness and emotional resilience, she started to allow herself to be vulnerable in small ways, building her emotional strength and trust slowly, one step at a time. She realized that emotional intimacy wasn't about giving away control. It was about sharing her true self with another person, allowing them to accept and love her for who she truly was. Over time, Sarah learned to open her heart again, but this time with the wisdom that Stoicism had instilled in her. The past didn't define her, and emotional intimacy didn't have to be a threat. It was an opportunity for growth, healing, and connection. The fear of emotional intimacy is not unique to women who have experienced multiple relationships, but for many, it is amplified by the pain of past experiences. However, understanding that vulnerability is an essential part of love can empower women to break free from this fear, allowing them to form deeper, more fulfilling connections. Sign 5. The need for independence and self-sufficiency. As we move forward from the fear of emotional intimacy, let's delve into another sign that often appears when women have experienced multiple relationships: the deep-seated need for independence and self-sufficiency. While independence is a positive trait in many ways, for these women, it can become a shield that prevents them from embracing the kind of partnership that they may truly desire. The desire for independence often becomes a coping mechanism developed through painful experiences. After several heartbreaks, many women begin to believe that they can only rely on themselves, fearing that opening up to someone again will only result in disappointment. So, they start to build their own world, one that doesn't require the validation or support of a partner. Take the story of Emily, a woman who had always prided herself on being strong and self-reliant. After a string of unfulfilling relationships, she made the decision to focus on herself. She built a successful career, spent time with friends, and became an expert in managing her own life. Emily had everything under control, or at least that's what it seemed like on the surface. But as time passed, Emily began to feel a growing sense of loneliness. Despite her outward success and independence, she couldn't ignore the hollow space that lingered in her heart. She longed for emotional connection, for someone to share her triumphs and her struggles with. Yet, every time someone showed interest in her, she found herself pulling away. She had created a life where she didn't need anyone, but deep down, she wanted to be needed. The problem was, she had convinced herself that depending on anyone, even a partner, was a weakness. Emily's story isn't unique. Many women who have experienced emotional pain and disappointment often turn to self-sufficiency as a means of protection. They believe that by relying on themselves, they can avoid the vulnerability that comes with relationships. However, this reliance on self can eventually lead to emotional isolation. While independence is a vital and empowering trait, the refusal to depend on others, even in healthy ways, can result in a life where emotional fulfillment feels distant and unattainable. The philosophy of Stoicism offers wisdom on this issue. Stoics believe in the importance of self-control, but they also understand that human beings are social creatures. We thrive in relationships, and emotional interdependence is not a weakness but a strength. By learning to embrace both independence and interdependence, women can create a balanced life that allows for both self-sufficiency and meaningful emotional connections. For Emily, the turning point came when she realized that her desire for independence had built walls around her heart. She wasn't allowing herself to fully experience the depth of love and connection that life had to offer. It wasn't about abandoning her independence. It was about learning to let someone in without fearing the loss of herself. Through her journey, Emily learned to balance her need for independence with the vulnerability required for emotional intimacy. She allowed herself to trust again, but this time with the wisdom that being in a relationship didn't mean losing herself. She could be both strong and open, self-sufficient and connected. For women who've been through heartbreak, the desire for independence can feel like a safe harbor. But it's important to remember that true strength lies in the ability to embrace both independence and intimacy, allowing for growth and connection in ways that bring fulfillment, rather than isolation. Sign 6. Emotional guardedness and a fear of vulnerability. After diving into the deep need for independence and self-sufficiency, let's now explore a closely related sign: emotional guardedness and the fear of vulnerability. For women who have been through several relationships, the idea of opening up emotionally can feel like an invitation to pain and disappointment. The scars of past experiences weigh heavily, causing a profound reluctance to let their guard down. Take Sarah's story, for example. She was an intelligent, vibrant woman, always admired for her strength. But deep within, she harbored a quiet fear, the fear of loving and being loved, only to be hurt again. Her past relationships had left her with emotional wounds that were never fully healed, and each time she tried to let someone in, the echoes of betrayal and heartbreak would rise to the surface. Over time, Sarah became more and more closed off, setting up walls around her heart that she refused to tear down. In the beginning, it wasn't as evident to those around her. Sarah had perfected the art of keeping her emotions in check. To the outside world, she was just like any other confident woman, charming, fun, and outgoing. But if you looked closer, you'd notice how she often deflected serious conversations about feelings. She was never quite able to open up, even to those closest to her. And when someone tried to show her love or affection, she responded with distance, unsure of how to navigate the complexity of her own emotions. Her story is not unique. Many women who have experienced heartbreak develop an emotional armor to protect themselves. They've been burned before, and now the mere thought of being vulnerable feels like a dangerous risk. Vulnerability, after all, opens the door to hurt. The problem is, by refusing to let down their guard, they are also closing themselves off to the love and connection they crave. Emotional guardedness becomes a barrier, a silent prison they've built for themselves. This guardedness often manifests in subtle ways: avoiding deep conversations, deflecting compliments, or deferring emotional intimacy. It can also show up as an overemphasis on logic or practicality, trying to control situations so as not to feel out of control emotionally. The fear of vulnerability creates a cycle of emotional numbness, where the woman appears emotionally distant even when she desperately yearns for connection. However, as difficult as it may be to admit, emotional guardedness doesn't protect us from hurt. It simply prevents us from experiencing the richness of love and deep connection. In the Stoic philosophy, it is acknowledged that life is filled with both joy and suffering, and while it's natural to avoid pain, true strength lies in accepting vulnerability as part of the human experience. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's a testament to our courage and resilience. By allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we invite the possibility of meaningful connections and deeper emotional growth. For Sarah, the turning point came when she realized that her fear of vulnerability was keeping her stuck. One evening, after a long conversation with a close friend, she admitted that her fear wasn't just about being hurt. It was about not trusting herself enough to heal. She realized that by refusing to be vulnerable, she was denying herself the very thing she most needed: love. In time, Sarah began to take small steps toward vulnerability. She started sharing more with those she trusted, allowing herself to feel her emotions without judgment. She learned that being vulnerable didn't mean being weak. It meant being brave enough to face the potential for hurt and still open herself to the beauty of connection. Emotional guardedness can be a shield, but it's a shield that often traps us in isolation. By embracing vulnerability, we give ourselves the chance to experience the depth of love, joy, and growth that life has to offer. After all, it's in the moments of true vulnerability where we discover our greatest strength. Sign 7. Unapologetically prioritizing herself. Following the emotional guardedness and fear of vulnerability comes one of the most empowering traits of a woman who has experienced a great deal in her life: the ability to unapologetically prioritize herself. This shift is profound and marks a deep evolution in how she views her worth and the value of her time, energy, and love. It's a sign that she has not only learned from past experiences, but has also committed to the ongoing process of self-care and self-respect. Take Emma's story, for example. For years, she had been in relationships where she gave and gave, always putting others' needs before her own. She convinced herself that love meant sacrifice and that her role was to constantly serve, support, and make others happy, often at the expense of her own happiness. But deep down, she felt drained, overwhelmed, and lost. It wasn't until her third serious relationship ended in heartbreak that she finally started asking herself, why didn't I matter as much as I thought I did? This question led Emma down a path of self-reflection that changed everything. She began to understand that her worth wasn't defined by her ability to please others, but by her own sense of self-worth. As painful as it was, she realized that the constant cycle of giving without receiving was unsustainable and unhealthy. This was the wake-up call she needed. Emma was worthy of love, care, and attention just as much as anyone else. In the months that followed, she started to redefine her boundaries. She no longer let anyone take up her emotional space without consideration for her own needs. She stopped saying yes when she meant no, and began making time for activities that brought her joy and peace, even if it meant saying no to others. She committed to herself, to her growth, happiness, and mental well-being. At first, it felt strange. After all, she had spent so many years putting others first that it seemed almost foreign to focus on her own desires. But with each day, Emma grew stronger and more comfortable in her own skin. What Emma discovered through this transformation is something many women who live alone learn over time. When you make yourself a priority, you begin to understand what truly matters in life. Your value isn't determined by your relationships with others, but by the relationship you have with yourself. Women who have navigated life's challenges and come out stronger tend to stop apologizing for living their truth. They stop dimming their light to make others feel comfortable, and they stop sacrificing their happiness for the sake of others. Prioritizing herself didn't mean Emma became selfish or cold. On the contrary, it made her more loving, more compassionate, and more grounded. When she stopped giving from an empty cup, she was able to give from a place of abundance. She learned that the best way to love others was by first loving herself, fully and unapologetically. This sign of self-prioritization is not about being selfish. It's about understanding that your time, energy, and emotional capacity are valuable. It's about knowing that you deserve to take up space and that your needs are just as important as anyone else's. This confidence in one's own worth is what makes women who live alone not just independent, but truly strong. The ability to unapologetically prioritize herself is a powerful reflection of her resilience and wisdom. It's a message to the world that she is no longer willing to compromise her happiness for the comfort of others. She knows that in order to give the best of herself to the world, she must first give the best to herself. And that's exactly what makes her the strongest person you'll ever meet. I understand you're looking to create an engaging and compelling call to action for your audience. Here's a revised version. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button. It means the world to us. Sparkling Heart, we love hearing your thoughts. So drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Your opinions matter, and they could inspire others. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to watch our other content for more empowering stories that will fuel your soul. Subscribe and join our community of strong, fearless individuals. Together, let's continue to grow and thrive. Glowing Star.